The best part of being a student at Amrita University, especially the Amritapuri campus, is our access to some of the most intellectual and peaceful minds in India. But what's the use if you just take the lessons to live from our classrooms and leave the campus without taking the lessons for life from their experiences? This podcast, Path Ahead, will help you to meet our faculty outside the classroom. I'm Chejana Santosh Kumar, and let's start the podcast. There are some teachers who teach subjects from their experience rather than from the textbooks. Our guest today, Prof Sethuraman Rao from Amrita Wireless Networks and Applications, popularly known as Sethu Bro among students, is one among them. He's one of the coolest and talented teachers in Amrita. He's so chilled out that even if you post memes on him in the group, he'll reply to you cheerfully. He has over 30 years of industry experience, 50 publications, and holds 2 patents. So, sir, hello and welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Santosh.
So, sir, we'll try to follow a chronological order from your childhood to present. So, let's start with your childhood. So, sir, tell me about your schooling. Where did you study? What are your favorite subjects? Were you a first bencher or a last bencher?
Okay. Yes. So, I grew up in Chennai. I grew up in Chennai. There's a town called Ambattur, which is like North Chennai or North Madras in those days. Yeah. That's where I was born, and my schooling was also there. Mine was the last, the SSLC batch. That is like, up to 11th standard you study in school, and then you do 1 year of PU. So I did my PU in Vivekananda College, that is in Chennai, again. After that, so after 12 years of schooling, I joined IIT Madras. Yes. So I joined IIT Madras. My discipline.
So we'll come to IIT later. We'll concentrate on the schooling now. So can you tell me what are your favorite subjects in the school? Physics, science?
Okay. Sure. So it's interesting. Okay. When I was really small, there's this guy, he came to get some alms, and the guy looked at me and said, "Ee abbai ki ganitam baga vachunu." That means in Telugu, as you know, my mother is from Kadapa, and we had some tenants, who are Telugu. So I know a little bit. I can kind of barely manage. I can't claim that I know Telugu. So obviously, you know what it means. It means that this fellow, will be good in math. Yeah. I guess it was true until some point. Right now, I've kind of lost touch with math completely. So I'm kind of unhappy about that. But yeah, I think math was my favorite subject, and I used to love solving the math problems. Whatever the subject may be, whether it's trigonometry or algebra, whatever. So while growing up, math was indeed one of my favorite subjects. So I think that, you could take the guess. Obviously, I was a front bencher, no question about that, I was like the topper right through the school, right up to 11th standard. I was the class topper. I was the school topper also. It was a habit of sitting in the front bench only. Of course, I wasn't that tall, so that also helped, So that way, it wasn't a problem for others if I sat on the front bench. I wasn't really blocking anybody. Yes.
So, sir, what differences do you notice between the schooling then and schooling now? Lot has changed, right?
Lot has changed, absolutely. In those days, we never heard of something called forget smartphone. While growing up, we did not have a phone at home. Even the landline phone, we did not have. No TV. Especially for, while I was growing up, there was no TV, not even black and white TV. Mm-hmm. And we were not brought up to go to the movie theaters also to, watch movies and all. So I barely watched any movies while I was growing up. So it was all, paper and pencil, and then paper and pen. Of course, you start off with your black slate and the chalk. That's how you start to learn writing. That's how your elementary school is. And then you switch to pencil with, notebook. Yeah. And then the pen, and even then the ballpoint was not really encouraged. You were encouraged to use the ink pen. It's a good idea. Your handwriting turns out better when you use the ink pen versus the ballpoint pen. Oh. So that is how it was. So no such gadgets. Google did not exist. Internet did not exist. Nothing existed. So it was a totally different world altogether. But I guess it was also much more enjoyable. There was a lot more human level connection and getting together, getting out to play, things like that. the kind of games we played were totally different from the kind of games that children play today. So, yeah, it was totally different, as you can imagine.
Yes, yes. So, sir, you did your BTech and MTech in IIT Madras. So, at the time of your study, many were not aware of IITs, and there were no coaching centers for cracking IITs. So, how did you find your way to IIT?
It's a very good question. To be honest, about 6 months from the time I actually joined IIT, I did not know that such a thing as IIT existed. I think it was just serendipity. Somebody told my father that there is this IIT, and then immediately I joined a crash course with brilliant tutorials. For about 6 months, I had a coaching program. I went through the coaching program with the brilliant tutorials. I think that helped. And then that is how I ended up writing the IIT entrance. Because again, with all these reservations and all that, yes, I did not, even though the marks were pretty good, I still did not stand a good chance of getting into any of the engineering colleges in Chennai, which is kind of unfortunate. So, but for IIT, I would probably have not been an engineer. I would have probably gone into something else. So, and then even after writing the IIT entrance, I wasn't hopeful at all because, especially physics was like totally out of my comprehension. So mathematics was okay, chemistry was cool. So, yeah. But somehow it all worked out, and my first preference was electronics, but I could not get that with my rank. My rank, I believe, was like 240 or something like that.
Oh, 240 and you didn't get electrical.
Electronics.
So I think there was more competition for IIT Madras then.
Correct, exactly. Yeah. In fact, we had, among the toppers, we had quite a few in IIT. Number 1 was IIT Madras, number 4 was IIT Madras. So I think after that, somehow it kind of became less attractive for whatever reason. But in those days, IIT Madras was like one of the top choices, you're right. And number of seats in electronics was also not that many. So
that's the point.
It was only 20 seats or something like that.
Oh, sure.
And there was no computer science. There was no computer science at IIT Madras at that time. It started only during my 4th year or something like that. So that's how I ended up in mechanical. And mechanical at IIT was also IIT Madras was considered pretty good. So
yeah, I think that's the best in India.
Correct. Yeah. Right.
So, sir, can you share me your experience in IIT? How was it studying there?
It's a great experience. I mean, I guess it's just like any other college experience. More than the academics, you grow as a person. Your personality matures. You get to hang out with your peers, and of course, I stayed in the hostels. So that was my first experience staying in the hostel, and of course, being IIT again, brilliant chat. Everybody all their own toppers from their own schools, and
you'll get to connect with one of the brightest minds in India.
Very true. So in the way they think, and of course there are also people. There is one set of people who once they join IIT, they kind of take it easy because they know the moment they pass, they will somehow get into some place. And of course, in those days, going abroad after IIT was well sought after. So in my batch, I would say more than 90% or even more than that went abroad for further study. And they knew that, if they do reasonably well, they'll get into some university in the US and they can go on from there. So there were some people who even did drugs and stuff like that. But I think one thing is that they don't get addicted. So they know where to stop. So they only take it as a hobby. So they do it only occasionally after the exams, Not everybody. It's a small group. But the point is, they're all doing pretty well today. So it's not that they, but that I wouldn't recommend that for whatever reason, because again, it depends on our mindset. Sometimes when the mind is weak, the moment you get exposed to something, you could get addicted. So for that reason, I would definitely not recommend that to anybody, because it's dangerous. We don't know. So that way, it's better to keep off. But the point is, I mean, there were all kinds of people, and there were, of course, good sportsmen also, all-rounders, so all sorts of people, and the way they've turned out in their lives. Fortunately, again, with today's technology, especially, we have a WhatsApp group where we're still in contact with each other. We know what they're doing.
That's great.
Even the updates we keep getting. So it's nice to know how they're doing in their life.
Yeah. So, sir, what are the differences do you notice between IIT and Amrita as a university?
So good question. So IITs have been established. So in that sense, their infrastructure, and they also get a lot more funding from the government. So they have a lot more resources to establish their infrastructure and have the facilities. But I think with the Amrita's very limited runway from the time they were started,
Yeah.
the infrastructure we have is pretty good. But of course, we had a lot more there, and of course, it was. I'm talking about the Amritapuri campus. The campus is pretty small compared to the IIT Madras campus.
Yeah,
The Madras campus is huge.
Of course.
I guess our Coimbatore campus will probably compare with it. I don't know the exact size of the both.
No,
both
I
the
don't.
campuses.
I think IIT Madras is way bigger than the Coimbatore.
Probably, yeah, probably. I'm not too sure about that. But it's on a beautiful campus, and teachers, again, it's a mix. There are some very good, motivated teachers, talented teachers. There are a few who are not all that good. But the thing with IIT is that, teachers is one of the factors, but the students are motivated by themselves. So, that level of motivation in the students, I would say, I don't see that many students at Amrita. There is a small, percentage, but that percentage is much smaller at Amrita when compared to the IIT. Because they're based on their backgrounds and based on their goals also, and they're, I guess, they're also, as they call the cream of the crop. So, they are the upper layer of the whole spectrum. So therefore, there is a lot more motivation. But to be honest with you, I haven't interacted a lot with the students at Amrita. So I should kind of offer my comments with a pinch of salt. The only recent exposure with especially the BTECs for me has been with this course that I was offering the last couple of semesters called Pervasive Computing.
Yeah.
Other than that, I have only interacted with the MTech students, and there's a difference between the MTech students and the BTech students. Even at IIT in those days, BTech students were considered, well, at least, I don't know, that they considered themselves great. In general, there was that, feeling, MTechs, okay, but BTechs, we are the BTechs of IIT.
Yeah. I think that vibe exists in recent times also.
I think so too. And it may be true to some extent. It's getting into an MTech program at IIT is not as difficult as getting into the BTech program. I think that's true even today.
Yeah, because most of the people will go to foreign universities, and correct. The competition will be less.
That is true.
Yeah. So, sir, you did BTech in mechanical, and you shifted to computer science in your MTech. So at the time, computer science is not, I don't think it's a really popular subject in India especially. So what made you to shift from mechanical to computer science?
It was popular. The computer science discipline in BTech was started during my 4th year at IIT Madras. Okay. And it was sought after. The moment it was started, and while I was at IIT, we had a mainframe computer. In those days, you used to have a deck of cards. You had to go and punch those cards using the card punching machine, and then submit it as a bad job. Next day, you get a dot matrix printout. If there's one syntax error in one of the cards, you will come to know the next day. You have to go and replace that card with a corrected, punched card and submit the deck back. And the next syntax error you come to know the next day, and so on. So that is how programming was. And the program we used in those days, the programming language was Fortran.
Yeah.
So during my BTech, I was using the computer center, and the job I got. Matter of fact, before I did my MTech in computer science, I worked for 5 years as a mechanical engineer. So I was with a company called Brakes India in Chennai. Padi, it's one of the TVS group companies dealing with the manufacture of automotive brakes. So I worked there, and I was in their R&D, and I was doing Fortran programming, finite element analysis of different components of the braking system. So the job involved a combination of dynamometer testing, which is lab testing, and then simulation using finite element techniques, and also testing on the road. So we used to go to Sholavaram. In those days, Sholavaram had the racing track. Then it got shifted to Sri Berambur. We used to go there, take the vehicle, fit the new brakes and really, abuse the brakes. Yeah, just test them at different extreme conditions and all that. So it was good fun. So I was there for 5 years, and then I came back to IIT Madras. I had to write GATE. So I wrote GATE 3 years after, and I wrote GATE in mechanical. But then I wanted computer science. So there was only one seat allocated, like a quota, for mechanical GATE to get into computer science. So I failed in my first attempt, even though the percentile was pretty good. In the second attempt, after 5 years, I got through. So that's how I got into the computer science program at IIT Madras after 5 years of work.
So were you enthusiastic towards computer science from your childhood, or you picked up the
not from the childhood. Childhood, I didn't know there was something called a computer, right? So it was basically during my IIT time. Yes, I was. So when I was doing my BTech mechanical, I was interested in computer science. I think we had a course also in Fortran. And then I was doing some scientific programming in those days. And then even my job involved quite a bit of programming. And my manager at Breaks India was quite high energy. So we used to have like weekend lectures from IIT profs on such techniques, finite element mechanism, techniques and all that during my stay at Breaks India. So we had that kind of a connection with IIT also.
Oh, that's great. So, sir, how was your transformation from college to corporate?
Good question.
So what I think is my internship started like 2 or 3 days back. Suddenly I have a boss, I have to work for them. They are giving me deadlines. So how did you face that?
Yeah, I think in my case, it was kind of smooth. The first job I had at Breaks India was an R&D job. So, there it was, the targets were more like, ambitious. It's not something that, it's not operational kind of work, more of research-based work. So there's some leeway of setting your own targets and working towards it. It was not like you work for a client and the client has a deadline and you have to deliver to that deadline. Not that kind of work. It was more of exploratory work, so that helped. And the manager was very supportive, and I think he also had a regard for people from IIT, and so the kind of work I got was more of research, like writing programs and things like that. So I didn't feel that kind of a delivery pressure, in the first job. And then after my computer science, MTech computer science, I joined the CDAC Bangalore. Again, that was again R&D.
Yeah.
So there also, and those days CDAC job was very lucrative because the IT revolution had not started. So in terms of the salaries and the perks, what CDAC used to offer in those days was just phenomenal compared to the kind of salaries that other people used to offer. So it was good in that sense, but at the same time, with CDAC, there were some delivery schedules and all that because we were developing our own parallel computer, and I was involved on the software side. I was involved with the debugger and the profiler for the programs that run on these parallel computers. So it was a little more target driven, but still it was all like, internal. It's not something that is dictated by a third party client who needs to get something done. Yeah. So I would still say that, it was kind of transition was smooth. And then, of course, I was there at CDAC for about 4 years. And then I went abroad. I went to the US. So, and in US, of course, it's a lot more schedule driven. You have to have schedules and all that.
Yeah.
And I was working for a startup company. But by that time, I think I was pretty much acclimatized to the corporate environment and, meeting the deadlines.
Yeah.
So it was kind of smooth. I didn't really feel the pressure of delivering to targets so much. Somehow I could manage that. But you're right. It is a different environment. Going from academics to a corporate environment, you get to learn a lot. You get to face a different environment altogether. The kind of pressure, the kind of interactions, and you learn in the process. You also learn to be more professional. You learn how to respond to people how to communicate, all those things. So it's gradual. Obviously, like you said, it's been only a few days. So it's just as days go by, you are going to get used to it, and it's going to become more familiar and more comfortable. It's a matter of time.
So how is your overall experience in the industry? Like, you have worked over 30 years. So what are your takeaways from the industry?
So one thing, when you go to the industry, you have to kind of decide upfront about which ladder you want to climb. So there is something called a technical ladder and a management ladder. So a lot of people get confused whether I should be on the technical side or the management side. That is some decision you have to make quickly. Obviously, you cannot make it on day one, but I would say within the first year or two, you should make that decision clearly, and you should stick to that and work towards that, right? So, for example, if you want to climb up the management ladder, at some point, maybe getting an MBA is a good idea. If you want to stick to that technical ladder, at some point, getting a PhD is a good idea. So, in my case, I ended up doing neither. So, it is not a good thing. I should have either gone for an MBA or should have gone for a PhD. So, that way.
But you have done your MTech, right?
Correct. But, a PhD would have been even better.
Of course.
And I think I was also like kind of switching between the two. I was half-heartedly going towards the management ladder, and then kind of realized late that it's not really my cup of tea, because it requires a different set of skills. Obviously, it is more business oriented. It has to be a lot more competitive also. When you go to the management ladder, obviously, it's a pyramid, right? As you're going up the pyramid, the number of slots is going to get reduced. So there is competition, and you should know how to compete. So those are skills that you have to learn. But bottom line, some people are good at doing that and delivering you talked about the targets and the deliverables. So that it becomes a lot more competitive on that side. If you are judged by how you deliver, how you extract work from others, and extracting work from others is a skill by itself. It's not something that you will get easily. So that is one decision you have to make. Whether you want to be technical or you want to get into management, and then equip yourself accordingly based on that. And also, you have to strike a balance between how much time you spend at each company, at what time you switch, all that. I didn't pay much attention to all that. But, again, if you want to really manage your career, you don't want to spend too much time at one company, unless, of course, you're doing very well there and you are happy with it and you're growing there. All that is fine. The company is also growing. Otherwise, maybe there is like a threshold, maybe like 5 years or 5 to 6 years, when you say, okay, you make that call at that time. Would it make sense for me to look for a different opportunity, or would it make sense for me to continue here? But some people tend to do it too fast, like every year, every couple of years. That is too early and too fast. Of course, if something doesn't work out, you want to change. Otherwise, you have to balance that. Essentially, you have to pay some attention to how you grow your career. So it has to be something that has to be thought through and you paid attention to, so that you make the right choices at the right time. And for the same reason, you also have to have your contacts. So you have to have, when you want to switch jobs, the best thing that works is through going through your contacts. Nothing like that as compared to responding to advertisements and going through the normal channels, because that is much more time consuming and less efficient. But if you have some kind of a rapport with somebody and they know you, they trust you, they value your skills, it becomes a lot easier to make that switch. So as part of your corporate career, developing contacts, nurturing contacts becomes a very important aspect.
That's a very interesting experience. So sir, when I had gone through your profile, I had noticed many interesting things. Two of them are your publications and patents. So can you tell me one of your favorite paper or project, or maybe your project in the industry also, maybe?
So since you brought up publications, when I was in the industry, publications was not the focus. So it was more of getting the projects delivered and getting the features into the different products and things like that. So only when I switched to academics, which was about 8.5 years ago when I joined Amrita, we'll come to that later maybe, the publication started afterwards. So there was one patent I had during my industry time that was to do with it's a software-based patent. How to do just like we do a ping in a IP network, layer 3. How do you do a similar ping in a layer 2 network? So that was the patent. So again, since the work was more in engineering than R&D, there was not that much of a scope to apply for patents, and maybe my interest was also not that at that time. So it was basically, if you talk about my 18 years in the US, it was mainly in the role of software development and software management. So that was pretty much, and when I say software, it is more to do with system software, because the companies I was with were all networking companies. So right from the time I went to the US, I started with a startup company which was doing ATM NICs. There was something called ATM, networking technology called ATM in those days, and I'm talking about the 90s. The ATM stands for asynchronous transfer mode, not the ATM machine. Essentially, the idea was that the way we transfer information is to break it into cells, and then the cells are transported. So ATM was very popular. At that time, people were talking about end-to-end ATM, all the way from the desktop to the server and all that. But then it didn't take off. So that time the startup company was doing ATM NICs, that is network interface cards, and then we were doing ATM switches. But then when ATM died, the company went through several transformations. Then we got into Ethernet switching. The Ethernet switching, hardware-based Ethernet switching became very popular. And a lot of data centers with high rate switching using these hardware Ethernet switches, which had their own ASICs with purpose-built ASIC. So that was very popular, and so these data centers, what are known as metro networks, right? Based on MPLS. The MPLS was a very popular technology. So I was into that, and then again when I joined Juniper, again I was with the Ethernet switches division. Juniper, as you might know, started off as a router company. So when they were formed, they were like, they gave a real competition to Cisco because nobody could actually match Cisco. And then they wanted to diversify into switches. So that is when I joined Juniper. I spent 5 years at Juniper. So essentially, basically the career was pretty much dealing with system software development and management. So publications was not the focus. All the publications, mainly I should attribute the publications to students at Amrita. Otherwise, I wouldn't have had this new publication.
So, why did you shift from corporate life to teaching field? I guess everything is going well with corporate life. Why there's a sudden shift to teaching field?
Yeah, that's actually a very pertinent question. So, I always had this desire to, get into teaching. Like I was telling you before, I was a little confused between the technical, growth versus management growth. But I think that desire to be more technical was always there, and the desire to teach was also there very much. In fact, at some point I was even contemplating being a school teacher, because that again is the reason for that is, it's so fulfilling. When you contribute towards the knowledge or the learning of students, and you see them getting transformed, that really gives you that feeling of satisfaction. So that's the main reason I wanted to get into teaching. And fortunately, the things kind of came together. So one thing is that, while we were in the US, we got introduced to Amma, who is our chancellor of Amrita. And that relationship, kind of grew. It became stronger, it became, richer. And the vice chancellor of Amrita, Dr. Venkatrangan, was my classmate at IIT and Amrita. He was doing his, BTech in electronics at that time. And he was actually the batch topper of it. He was the gold medalist in that batch. And so, when Amma used to come to the US, we used to go and see her, and he also used to be there, and he used to tell me, why don't you come to Amrita, join Amrita, it'll be good for you, and teach and all that. So that attraction was there. And of course, when I come to Amrita, especially when I'm at Amritapuri, I'll be with Amma also, so I get to see more of her, that was also an attraction. So, and also another thing, being in the US, we were also convinced that we had to get back to India at some point. So, as a family, we had that as a goal. So somehow, all this came together, and coming to Amrita as a faculty became a very nice, like dream segue to fulfill many of those ambitions I had. So that way, I would say this was a great transformation, and I relish every moment of my tenure now at Amrita.
Okay, that's great. That's good to hear. Sir, you said you are meeting Amma in US, but why did you meet her at the first time? Like, why you are interested towards spirituality? Was it there from your childhood, or you suddenly picked up in the US because your friends are following her?
It was very much there from childhood. In the childhood itself, I used to go to some classes outside of school hours to learn some, slokas, even some Vedic chants. So I learned Sanskrit also with a teacher. There was one, Sri Rajagopal Iyer, who was in, Ambattur, Chennai. So I used to learn from him Sanskrit, slokas, some Vedic chants and all that. And then, so that was like the groundwork. That was like the basics, the foundation, where both your religious exposure as well as spiritual exposure, more religious than spiritual at that time. But it was basically religious exposure is the groundwork for future spiritual exposure. And so that was the foundation. And then when I was at IIT, I used to go to these lectures. They used to have this Gita Jnana Yajnam. There is one Sri Parthasarathi, who, in Chennai, who used to, I think, who still gives like 1 week lectures. It will be in some open grounds where, in the evenings and mornings, they will have talks on one chapter of Bhagavad Gita. And then Swami Chinmayananda used to come. So I used to go to those lectures. So the Gita lectures, Upanishadic lectures during my IIT time. Also during my IIT time, there was one professor of metallurgy called Srikanta Kumar Swami, who was also well versed in the whole of Yajurveda. And he used to have classes in the evenings to teach Vedic chanting. I used to go there also. And even after getting out of IIT, I used to go to his home on weekends and learn some Vedic chants. So, in that sense, and in addition, of course, so many things. Even my dad was involved in a local satsangam where they used to have discourses in Ramayana, Bhagavatam, and I used to go there. So a lot of exposure in multiple ways, and so that interest was always there. And even after going to the US, we used to go to the Chinmaya mission programs. They used to have retreats. They have a ashram somewhere near San Francisco, north of San Francisco. We used to go there for like a week-long retreat, and then also lectures by the local resident Swami of Chinmaya mission. We used to go to attend those lectures and all that. So that exposure was there. So, we knew that Amma was coming to the US twice a year because the local newspapers used to have articles on the hugging saint and how people flock to her, how she transforms people's lives and all that. But somehow, obviously, it took us till 2003. And so we had some of our friends going to see her who used to also come to Chinmaya mission programs. So we knew about her. But somehow or other, we didn't go until 2003. But then the friends kept telling us that you should come. So finally, we did go. We went in 2003. But that was it. The moment we went there once, that was like a transformational experience. Okay. And then on, it became this project.
So, sir, how has spirituality transformed your life? Can you tell me your perspective towards spirituality?
So, spirituality is essential. The exposure to spirituality is essential for the proper, growth and the maturity of us all. So, having that exposure, having that foundation, having that progression. Without that, we could very easily go astray. And we see that happening. Today, we can see that a lot of youngsters are kind of listless. They don't have proper guidance. So that was the beauty of our traditional way of learning, traditional way of teaching, where there was a nice balance between the material aspects and the spiritual aspects. So when that balance is lost, it's like one of the wheels coming out of a two-wheeler. So basically, even though we don't realize it, in order to get the right perspective on life and the goals of life, having a good understanding of what do we mean by spirituality, how is it relevant to our life. So that understanding has to be there, and that has to start from a very young age. There is a lot of a wrong perception that we can get into spirituality maybe after retirement. So it's not some hobby that you get into after retirement. In order to have the right mindset, in order to face the challenges that life will throw at you with the right attitude, spirituality is required. Otherwise, it is you won't be equipped to deal with the challenges. Life will be throwing challenges at you. There is no question about that.
Yeah.
But sometime or the other, you have to deal with those situations, and developing the right mindset is what spirituality results in. So that is what spirituality is, to understand the priorities properly. So what are our priorities? How to balance them? So those are the lessons one learns. And I would say that I had the fortune of learning that early on. Like I said, right from my days at IIT, I was exposed to, even before that, I would say, I was exposed to such thoughts and the whole thought process and its relevance. Yeah.
Yes. So, sir, can you tell me your favorite episode from Bhagavad Gita? You can go back to and refer that episode and make some decisions from Bhagavad Gita, or maybe Mahabharata on the whole.
So, if you talk about Mahabharata, the high point of Mahabharata is the battlefield of the Kurukshetra, when Arjuna loses his mental composure.
Yeah.
He was a great warrior. He was a learned person. He was not like an ordinary person. He was a learned person. He had good exposure to scriptural knowledge, and yet when the challenge arose, he just lost it. He just could not deal with it, and that was how the Bhagavad Gita was born. So the essence of Bhagavad Gita is the most commonly quoted verse in Bhagavad Gita is the verse that goes like Karmanyeva adhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana ma karma phala heturbhuh ma te sangostva karmani. So very, very, it's a gem. It's like such a precious verse that all of us have to kind of imbibe and make it part of our way of life. As you might know, what it means is you have the authority to decide how you would act. How you would act is in your hands, but what kind of fruit or what kind of result it would bring is not in your hands. So when the result comes, it's like the arrow has already left the bow. Where it goes and hits, whether it hits the bullseye or some periphery or even completely misses the target, you just have to accept it and then try again. So ma phaleshu kadachana, the fruits are not in your control at all. So whatever comes your way, accept it, don't be in denial, and then look for what to do next. And so don't be after the fruit of the action while you are acting. Ma karma phala heturbhuh. When you are acting, just get immersed in the action. Give your 100% and enjoy your action. So as much as enjoying the fruit, you should enjoy the act itself. So the very act of acting or action Enjoy that and give it your 100%. And the most important, the last part, ma te sangostu akarmani. So don't say, oh, anyway, things are not in my control, so I'm not going to act, I'm going to sit idle. That is the worst thing that you can do, because as they say, the idle mind is a devil's workshop. So you don't know what you'll end up with when you just say, okay, I'm not going to bother, I'm not going to do anything about it. No, you have to figure out what to do next. What is the next step? And take it. That should be your goal all the time. So don't sulk, don't feel bad, something didn't work out, but just look for what is the next best thing to do and go for it 100%, wholeheartedly. And that is a great philosophy to imbibe and adopt in one's life. And once you have that, that's what, is the essence of what they call karma yoga. And when you do that sincerely, then you develop the right attitude, and your mind is not perturbed, your mind is at peace. So like Swami Parthasarathy used to say, keep your mind at rest while engaging in action. So that should be the goal. And if you have done that, then you have arrived. That's pretty much the essence of all spirituality. Your mind does not require a lot of activity, but your body requires activity. So physical exercise, do as much as you can, keep it trim and keep it in good shape. Mental exercise, as in worrying and going through so many thoughts, keep it down. So the number of thoughts has to be reduced, the mind has to be calm, the body has to be active. So that balance has to be achieved by us. So, I mean, that I would say is the essence of Bhagavad Gita for us, especially who are active, who are professionals, who are working, who are contributing mentally, also intellectuals. So for all of us, having that understanding and implementing that understanding in our life becomes a very important aspect.
Yeah, that's great to hear. So sir, which books impacted you the most, and any book recommendations for us?
So these days, audios have become more popular, videos, of course.
Yeah.
So of late, I have been listening to some of the talks on Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishads by one Swami Paramarthananda. Okay, there is a website where they have archived all his talks. He actually is there in Chennai. Even today, I think he gives talks. And I like his style, so intellectual, so analytical, and the way he analyzes and presents the whole thing in a cohesive, logical, systematic fashion. It is just so amazing. So if someone wants to get into our spiritual way of thinking, our spiritual knowledge, the scriptural knowledge, and wants to go about it systematically, I would say just you can do a search for Swami Paramarthananda, Paramartha, Paramarthananda. You will get the website. It's all archived. So you can start with some. He even has basic lectures on what the whole system is about, how it all comes together, and then you can get into maybe his summary of each chapter of Bhagavad Gita, for example. And the way he presents it again is phenomenal. One thing I really like at Amrita is I teach one course called Amrita Values Program. Yeah. I do it for our MTechs now. The MTechs at WNA. We have like three programs at MTech for MTech at WNA. One in wireless networks and applications, one in biomedical instrumentation and signal processing, and one in geoinformatics and earth sciences. So together they're about 35-40 students. I teach this. It's like a one hour per week. And I am very impressed with the way they respond. Like I gave them an exercise recently to prepare a presentation on what is your vision to serve the world. And the kind of responses I got, I was like totally impressed. I was blown away. So it's good to see that youngsters have such noble, lofty ideals and vision to contribute. And and hopefully they'll get the right opportunities and right environment to realize and actualize what they have in their minds. And it was actually really encouraging for me to understand their thought process. And so going back to what you asked me, I would if you were looking for something to start with, I would recommend these lectures by Swami Paramarthananda. So that's a good way to start.
Thank you, sir. So, sir, from your experience, what advice will you give to us who are joining the corporate now, and for the first years who started their engineering?
Have your goals clear. So now, if you want to eventually get into academics, it's okay to, one thing, in many cases the studies are sponsored by the parents, almost all cases.
Yeah.
So it's good to relieve them of that economic burden. So even if you have the idea of, pursuing your PhD later, if you think you should work for a couple of years, 3 years, get some money, maybe clear off some loans, or support them for some time, and eventually get into academics, that's a good approach. So, or for that matter, you want to study further. Let's like we said, if you want to get into the management ladder, if you want to do your MBA, again, it makes sense to work for some time and earn enough money to support yourself for your further studies. So one thing, essentially, you've been depending on your parents for quite some time. Try to relieve them of that burden in whichever way you can. So try to be more self-sufficient, self-supporting, and eventually, of course, you should get to a stage where you support them also and kind of repay what they did for you all their lives. You were the center of their lives, and you still are. And so keep that in mind, and make sure you keep them happy. And success will come. You just have to have that focus and don't waver. So make it clear what you're after, and then go after it wholeheartedly. Be patient. Today patience is one thing that is lacking big time. We are all so after instant results, but in life it doesn't work like that. So just have to be patient, and there could be setbacks, but as they say, failures are stepping stones to success. So just work through the setbacks, learn your lessons. Again, that's how you gain experience. Don't gain experience through your success stories. The more valuable experiences through your failures.
Yeah.
And so decide what you want to be. If you want to grow as a, if you want to grow in marketing, or you want to grow in sales, you want to grow in engineering, decide where you want to be. And again, even the domain. If you have a passion, you may not have the wherewithal to go after it today, but don't let go of it. Just keep that in mind and bide your time. So maybe you have to do something else for some time to get more financially sound, to get more independent, to get more mature, to get a better understanding of what you're really after. So it could be whatever reason, but just keep that thought process going and keep thinking, what is it that I want to be in my life, and how can I contribute using my talents, using my acquisitions? How can I give back, and what is the best way I can be impactful person? So when I am done with my career, how have I been able to contribute? How have I been able to make an impact? It could be anyway, and it depends on, again, your interests and your talents and all that. But just keep that in mind. Don't just drift away like a log of wood. So have your goal clear and work towards that goal. You can, after 2-3 years, you can change your goal. That's okay, but don't change it every day. But once you set a goal, do it after thinking about it clearly. And maybe 2-3 years later, you change your mind. That's okay, but don't make it too fickle. But whatever it is, set your goal clearly and work towards it. You'll get there. It's only a matter of time. That's all. It's only a matter of our own dedication, our sincerity towards that, and our effort, of course. Yeah.
And what is the advice that you give for the first years? Because they are in a state of total confusion, I guess. Like the online classes, they are not able to meet the faculty. So what do you think they should do in the 4 years?
So hopefully this is a passing phase. Sometime during this year, 2021, there should be more of the conventional way of coming back to the classes and interacting face to face with the faculty, having that kind of a personal touch, and all that. And so again, they should not be in a haste just because things are unfamiliar. The way we do today things online, obviously neither the faculty nor the students are familiar with that. It's something new. So there are challenges with that. But I think instead of hastily making any decision, just hang in there. Maybe another 6 months at least, or maybe another, I think at least in 6 months, the picture should definitely change, is what I feel, because especially in India, for whatever reason, if you look at the COVID curve, we are way down the decline. Right now, we are on the declining side, and now that the vaccine is also out, things should improve. And the good thing is that there is a lot of pent up energy. So, because of our other factors beyond our control, a lot of growth potential has been kind of kept under check. So when things come back to normal, obviously the growth spurt will be something phenomenal, especially in India, I think. No question about that. So all you guys will actually be able to ride that wave of growth. There's no question about that. So the opportunities, and not only that, because of the technological transformations, again, the opportunities for growth are increasing. Of course, the nature is also changing, right? There's more of machine learning, there's more of robotics, there's more of automation. So you have to be, on the lookout on what skills to equip with, what skills one should, learn in the process. So just being exposed and awake to the market changes, the changes in the industry, developments, etc. That has to be there, and you have to kind of adapt yourself. So, again, they say that in the future there will be a lot more automation. There are a lot more, dependence on artificial intelligence. There is a lot more dependence on robotics. So therefore, the role of the human is going to change. How exactly, we don't know, but we have a rough idea. Obviously, we have to elevate to the next level. And so, being in this field of engineering, we should always think about how we can contribute towards this change. And for that, same reason, even the nature of the jobs is going to change. So they talk about what is known as the gig economy. When they say gig economy, it's like you get paid for a gig. A gig is like a project, right? Yeah. So, you may not have like a full-time job, but there are some freelancers, so they have companies and corporates and business entities have specific requirements which they want to get fulfilled. And if you have the wherewithal to fulfill that requirement, they're willing to go with you if you offer a competitive, price and all that, with all the combinations. So if you develop the right skills and the right experience, so again, in that context, having internships to again gain hands-on experience. So even while you're doing your course, maybe weekends or summer vacations, go for short internships where we can pick up some practical skills. Talk to people, again going back to the contact. Be in touch with the people in the industry, people in the academia also, and get to know what are the trends, where is the industry going, and how does that match with my interests and my skill sets. So how can I match the two together? And I think out of the box. One other thing, in the US, this is a common practice, and maybe it is in India also. A lot of these companies, they have this concept of what they call a spin-in. So there is something called a spin-off in an industry. A spin-off is you take one particular aspect of your portfolio, product portfolio or service portfolio, and make it into a separate company. It's called a spin-off. Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's also a concept of a spin-in. A spin-in is an interesting concept. I wanted to bring it up today because the way that works is, once you have been with a company and they have developed confidence in your skills and your capabilities, and they want something done, some new technology or something new they want to work on. If they have to do it within the company, the ecosystem, the efficiencies, all that may not be quite good enough. So, the pace at which they can do it may not be good enough. The kind of resources they need to allocate maybe more. So what happens? They encourage a small section of their employees, like a talented group, one from marketing, one from sales, one from a few from engineering. So they form like a core group with different talents, but actually predominantly engineering, maybe combination of engineering and a little bit of marketing. And they they invest in that group. So they make this group form another company. It's called a spin-in. And so they will work on this particular technology for some time. They bring it to a stage where they have the initial set of customers and all that. So they have, kind of whatever investment was made, they will increase the value of their investment by working on that for maybe 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, whatever. And then the company buys it back. So that company that was a spin-in, Cisco does it very often, and many other big companies also do it. The spin-in company gets bought back into the company. And so in the process, obviously, the people who are part of the spin-in, they also get compensated pretty well. Yeah. And it all works out very well. So this is a very interesting concept, and I suspect this might become more popular in India as well going forward. But these are like the different ways that you can even leverage your goodwill with the company. One is that you can do some freelancing, these kind of gig economies or spin-ins. So kind of think outside the box, because the technology is advancing, because the rate at which it's advancing is also kind of accelerating. As long as we keep our eyes open, there will always be opportunities to contribute and also benefit, both knowledge-wise as well as monetarily. There must be ways to benefit. So it's just a question of having an open mind, keeping your eyes open, always on the lookout for what is happening and how I can play there, how I can fit in there. So, that combination will definitely pay off. But be enthusiastic, never lose hope. If you try once, you try twice, doesn't mean if you don't succeed, doesn't mean it's the end of the world. You have to try again. And youth is on your side. So, you have all the time to try out different things. But ultimately, don't ever get dejected or depressed. That should not be the outcome at all. Always willing to try different ways and never giving up. So that never say die attitude is very important. I think that is kind of missing in some of the current students. They give up very easily. So that should not be the case.
Thank you, sir, for being a wonderful guest, and it's an honor for me to have you in my show. I'm sure that all of us will find your advice very useful in our journey ahead. Thank you.
It was my privilege. Thank you for the initiative. I really appreciate your initiative. This is very valuable for the whole community, student community, and keep it going. All the very best. All the very best for you also with your career. I know, having interacted with you, you have tremendous potential. So just build on it and just kind of make it available to the entire world. Let the whole world benefit from your realization of your potential. Okay.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.